So this is where you start to determine what's really characteristic and what's not so characteristic. The more unique it is, the more severe it is, the more unusual it seems to be, the more significant. And then there's certain little tricks and things that I'll tell you along the way that have to do with like learning by experience what things are really more important or what's not. For example, if you're treating a flu, the fever, the time of day that the fever spikes and the time of day that the fever goes away, that's very important. It's very useful. So if you have that as a clear symptom, if you're lucky, it'll make it a lot easier. If you don't, then your job becomes harder. Certain things you're treating, like, I'll leave it there. So in the analysis, there is a tool that we have, and I gave you guys a handout on the first class. It's called repetirization. So it's like a chart. It's that chart where you have all these remedies, and you can fill out the symptom, and then you can put a check mark next to, does that remedy have that as a symptom? So there's computer programs that do this, which I use, and you can do it by hand, which has been done for over 150 years that way. So it just, without a computer, it just takes longer. So you look at all the remedies. If the person has a cough that's better at rest and worse at motion, that's two symptoms: cough, worse motion; cough, better rest. You can look through the materia medica at all the remedies that have that, and then start putting checks in the boxes. And then you go on to the next symptom, and the one that has all the checks and all the boxes is going to be at the top of your list. That doesn't mean, and that's how it's called repetirizing the symptoms, or repetirization. So that doesn't mean that the remedy at the top of the list is automatically the one that's prescribed. So when I'm taking the case of a patient and I'm entering in all these symptoms to the computer is not telling me what remedy to prescribe, but it's just a list from sort of most likely based on the repetirization to least likely what remedy we're gonna consider prescribing. What you have to do after the repetirization is go to the materia medica and read about the remedy. So the repetirization, the repertory, leads you to the materia medica. That's the purpose of repetirization. Repetirization is not designed to prescribe the right remedy. The purpose is to lead you to the materia medica. So then you can, and this is in an ideal perfect world, then you can study the remedy in the materia medica and make sure it really does fit the symptoms of that remedy, fit the symptoms of your patient. And we'll talk about these things because it could fit on a number of bases, but then, for example, it could be, for example, nux vomica, which is notoriously a chilly remedy, but this person it fits all the symptoms on repetirization, but the patient that you want to prescribe this remedy for is very calm and laid back and easygoing and warm. And you would never prescribe nux vomica for a patient who is not nervous, irritable, and chilly. So you just cross that off the list, and then you go to the next remedy, which is a method that a famous homeopath, Adolf Lippe, used to use. We call it the Lippe method. So you repetize your symptoms. You have a list from 1 to maybe 200, but you're probably not going to get to, hopefully you don't have to go all the way to 200. You look at the first remedy. Could it be this remedy? You start reading about it. Looks good, looks good, looks good. Maybe you can even make a list of like pros and cons of that remedy. And then if it seems like you'll get a sense it either fits or it doesn't fit. If it looks like it fits, you give that remedy. If it doesn't, you cross it off the list and move on to the next one. And then you study that remedy. And in the process of doing this, you really learn about these remedies. You learn the materia medica, you learn about the remedies, and it will take you a really long time for your first case and a really long time for your first 100 cases, but by the 101st case and the second 100 case, you can start really doing it quickly because you've learned it and you've gone through this process. So that's how, when I started out, I never prescribed a remedy for a chronic case in the office. I would sit there with the patient for 3 hours and then go home, sometimes for an hour, sometimes for 10 hours. Sometimes it would take me a day. I could call the patient the next day and prescribe the remedy. Sometimes it took me a week, before I could actually prescribe that remedy because I wanted to make sure. Now it's very rare that I don't prescribe a remedy by the time I'm done talking with the patient. So it's just, it takes time, but that's how it happens. Yeah.
How many go-to remedies do you have? Like 20, 40, 60 that you use more often than not?
Right. I would say for chronic cases, for acute, sometimes there's even more that you would consider. But for chronic cases, I would say there's 20 remedies that are used 80% of the time. Okay. But then, 20% of the time it could be, one of several hundred. In acute prescribing, I'd say 80% of the time it's going to be 100 remedies. So if you have a kit, I recommend that people get like a travel kit of 100 remedies. If you have a kit of the 100 most commonly prescribed remedies, probably your chances are like 70-80% that you'll be able to find it in that kit. If you have 200, probably your chances are like 90% it's in that 200. But if you get a kit of like 50, there's probably like over 50% chance it's that 50, those 50 remedies for acute prescribing. Probably 60, it's hard to say, maybe 60%.
For our purposes, yeah. 50 is you're good.
Well, I mean, similar to a medical doctor who would go to 20 different drugs as go-to drugs, even though there's thousands out there, he usually just generally knows what he's going to write for A, B, C, and D. So
And in the case of specialists, you're talking about maybe a dozen.
Absolutely.
Or 6.
Yeah, sure.
So then then you select the remedy based on that. Then the next step, the third step is that you're going to prescribe the similimum, or Alejandro, you probably heard this term from Dr. Pollack, the close enough-umum. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
Okay. So the similimum is that Latin, homeopathic Latin word that means the remedy that's the most similar. That is an ideal that we try to attain. And even when we give a remedy that's curative, we don't know that it's necessarily the similimum. The similimum will certainly cure the disease, but there could be 2 or 3 that might do it, or there might just be 1 that will actually cure. But there may be several, depending on the patient, how sensitive they are. There may be several that help quite a bit, or even help a lot. We talked about the bullseye and the target last time. So if you hit the bullseye, you're in the range of a similimum. If you're outside of that and towards the end of that target, you'll still help to some degree. It just might not be curative. So for clinical purposes, you want to at least get the close enough umum. So the remedy that gets close enough, similar enough that it's going to give a good clinical result. Another way of looking at the similimum is that we have several thousand remedies, and that's a lot. But we have millions and millions of natural substances that have never been tested or proven homeopathically to see what's out there. So it doesn't make any sense to assume that all of the diseases found in nature can be cured by only less than 0.1% of substances found in nature. We probably, if we could expand our repertoire, our materia medica, from several thousand remedies to several million remedies, our jobs would be a lot harder, but our jobs would be a lot easier. I mean, we'd be able to treat a lot more effectively. So we're probably dealing with remedies that are similar enough. It comes down to the degree of similarity, and the higher the degree of similarity of the remedy to the disease, the better the response is going to be from the body. So you want to get as close as you can. The most similar.